On the morning of July 1st, 2018, the residential neighborhood of Burari, Delhi, was waking up to a standard Sunday. But the local grocery store, owned by the respected Bhatia family, remained shuttered. When worried neighbors went upstairs to check on them, they walked into a horrific reality. 11 members of the family, spanning 3 generations, were dead. 10 of the bodies were hanging from a metal ceiling grill in a tight circular pattern. Their eyes were blindfolded with cloth, their mouths taped shut, and their hands and feet bound with electrical wire. When local police arrived, the physical evidence contradicted the usual patterns of violent crime. There were 0 signs of forced entry. The women were still wearing their gold jewelry, and a thorough sweep of the house turned up no suicide note. The scene completely defied the family's public standing. Their local businesses were expanding. Just 14 days prior to this tragic event, they had happily hosted a massive engagement party for one of the daughters. 11 people do not hang themselves in unison without a trace of physical struggle. To solve what happened inside this house, investigators realized they had to pivot from a physical autopsy to a psychological one. Detectives pulled the neighborhood CCTV footage, hoping to catch an intruder creeping into the alleyway. Instead, they watched the family members themselves willingly carrying the 4 specific stools and bundles of wire used in their own hanging. Inside the home, investigators found 11 handwritten diaries tucked near the family temple, containing entries spanning more than a decade. Reading through the pages in chronological order revealed a severe shift. The early notebooks contained mundane family discussions and financial planning. Over a decade, the text morphed into strict commands that micromanaged what the family ate, who they spoke to, and how they lived. The primary author of these rules was the youngest son, Lalit. He claimed the spirit of his deceased father, Bhopal Singh, was entering his body and speaking through him to guide the family to prosperity. These pages functioned as an 11-year instruction manual, a meticulous blueprint for a delusion that had slowly swallowed an entire household. The fracture point for the Bhatia family traces back to 2007. When the patriarch, Bhopal Singh, died, he left behind a massive leadership vacuum and a grieving household looking for direction. Lalit tried to fill that void, but his own mind was already fractured. Years prior, he suffered a brutal motorcycle crash, causing head trauma. Later, he was trapped in a plywood shop fire so terrifying that the psychological shock cost him his ability to speak for over a year. Soberly, none of this trauma was treated. In clinical psychology, when unchecked delusions from a dominant figure are forced onto isolated subordinates, it triggers a condition called shared psychosis. In this state, the primary patient's altered reality replaces the rational perception of everyone within the group. This dynamic thrived because of conformity. In a collectivist household where questioning the authority of an elder is taboo, the delusion went unchecked. It trapped everyone from 14-year-old grandchildren to a 60-year-old widow inside the same hallucination. They were systematically conditioned over 4,000 days, proving that within a tightly closed system, untreated trauma is highly contagious. The final diary entry outlined a grueling 7-day ritual called the Bodh Puja, or banyan tree ritual. It was documented as a strict act of repentance to free the family from their past mistakes and secure spiritual salvation. The instructions required the family members to mimic the hanging aerial roots of a banyan tree. They tied their hands and covered their eyes to empty their minds, acting with certainty that their grandfather's spirit would physically enter the room, untie the knots, and save them. By surrendering their critical thinking to Lalit's instructions, they died waiting for a miracle. The tragedy was a fatal accident of faith, where everyone involved remained blind to the lethality of their own actions. After 3 years of investigation, the Delhi Police Crime Branch officially closed the case. By identifying the psychological phenomena at work and ruling out foul play, they categorized the incident as an accidental death. But a massive question remains. The Bhatia family was educated and financially secure. Why did they ignore Lalit's obvious PTSD and psychotic episodes instead of consulting a medical professional? Seeking psychiatric care often carries the weight of profound familial shame. Cultural stigma frequently outweighs medical necessity, leading families to internalize crises that require professional intervention. The Bhatias faced intense pressure to project the image of a flawless, harmonious household. They hid their internal crisis at all costs, ignoring erratic behavior to ensure their social standing remained intact. If someone had treated a traumatized man's psychological wounds years earlier, 11 people would still be alive today. Hiding mental trauma to preserve a public image turns a family's darkest secret into a fatal trap.